Welcome to Storyhub, a podcast for customer-obsessed D2C leaders. The heroes of your brand story are your customers. Your best customers stay longer and spend more, driving growth as they love your products, brand, and their experience. On the podcast, we'll be talking to D2C leaders, innovative tech companies, and thought leaders from retail and hospitality about their observations, inspirations, and the simple hacks of crafting the experiences that keep customers coming back. Welcome to Storyhub.
They spend more, they stay longer, and they tell others about you.
It's what they say and what they do.
And then the boss says, but wait, for 50 years, we've allowed them to check bags for free. And the guy says, exactly. They don't have any idea what a good experience looks like. They haven't had a good experience. 2/3 of consumers say they cannot remember the last time any brand exceeded their expectations. We're going to help you get promoted because you just made the best decision of your career.
And we're off to the races. So thank you very much, Dan. It is an absolute honor to have the experience maker on the podcast. So thank you very much and welcome to the Storyhub podcast.
Andy, the honor is mine. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, Dan, for the four people who don't know your background, if you could just give them a brief glimpse into all that you do.
Well, come on, you four people. You're so far behind. I mean, come on. No, in all seriousness, I came at customer experience from corporate America. I spent 20 plus years as a marketer. Worked at some companies you've probably heard of, Discover Card, Humana in healthcare, and then McDonald's. And eventually got to the point as a marketer where I feel today, which is if I never have to do another marketing campaign again, it will be too soon. And the reason is that I firmly believe that if we want to really grow our business, we just have to get more people talking about us. And marketers know word of mouth is the most powerful kind of marketing. But I think what people haven't quite figured out, and what I'm hoping to help them figure out, is that the best way to generate word of mouth is by creating great experiences for your existing customers. And what we found time and time again is that when customers have great experiences, they spend more, they stay longer, and they tell others about you. And so it is a sort of triple win for your business in terms of growing both the customer base and your revenue.
Right. Yeah, we shortened that exact sentiment to happy customers stay, spend, and tell their friends. So
absolutely,
it's just like that. So one of the things that I shameless pitch, Dan's book. If you don't have it, get it. It's a great book and inspiration. And one of the things that you hit on there is breaking down the people that sort of matter in this experience. Because one of the challenges that I've seen time and time again is that it's certainly as a company grows and you have this big apparatus to operate, there are all of these levers and knobs and metrics and KPIs that oftentimes it's hard to think about the people. Because in any cell, in any Excel spreadsheet, that number represents people who chose to come back and do business with us again, with all the choices in the world. And so, that's sort of the focus on empathy and as driving as the motivator behind creating amazing experiences. And so, as you talk with companies about that duality, sort of getting them to be customer focused. I think of it as human focused because customers, employees, the customer's customers, all of those things. How did that begin to reveal itself, and what challenges do you find folks having with that?
Well, one of the things that I like to start with is that if we look at the assets of any company, the top two are going to be the same almost everywhere. And it's not your inventory, and it's not your technology, and it's not all the computer systems that you have. Your number one asset is your customers, because if you don't have your customers, you don't have a business, period. Your number two asset is your employees, because you need those employees in order to keep those customers happy. Everything else after that is somewhere below number one or number two. And as you well pointed out, both of those happen to be groups of humans. And so when we think of human interactions, I think it becomes easier to digest. For example, One of my favorite blog posts that I wrote was based on some advice that my mother gave me. In fact, she still gives me every time I travel. I call her up and say, Mom, I'm heading to so-and-so, such and such place for a speech. I'll be back on Tuesday. And she says, okay, son, be aware. This is her advice to me every time I travel. And I realized that be aware of your surroundings is actually a really good mantra for how to treat customers and employees. It's basically a play on the old golden rule, right? Of treat people the way that you'd want to be treated, or some say the platinum rule is treat them how they want to be treated. I look at it more as just pay attention to what's going on around you. As a consumer, you know what makes you happy and what aggravates you. I'll give you a great example. Raise your hand. Don't worry, people. We can tell if you're raising your hand. If you're driving, keep both hands on the wheel. But otherwise, raise your hand if you like pop-up ads. We'll wait. No one likes pop-up ads. But then you got to ask yourself, what marketer decides that we should put a pop-up ad in front of someone when we know that we ourselves can't stand them? Mm-hmm. And I had this debate at one of the companies that I worked with, because I was running the website, but I wasn't in charge of the pop-up ads, and I wanted to get rid of them. And the marketing team said, yeah, but they have a great conversion rate. I said, really, what's the conversion rate? They said 6%. That is excellent. I said, indeed, that is an excellent conversion rate. The problem is 94% of our customers are irritated at us because we got 6% to click through. If you don't think about that whole dynamic, then you're just not making good decisions. And I'm a huge believer that you can solve any business problem through the lens of the customer and make a good decision for the customer and for the business. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You can make a good decision for both.
Yeah, there's always this code switching that I see where, because we're all consumers, we're all customers, we're all out there satisfying whatever needs or desires that we have, and yet somehow when we walk through the veil of forgetfulness and enter into a company as a marketer, all of a sudden you're staring at this KPI saying, yeah, and knowing 94% of our customers is really optimized, and somehow. Just observe it, because you have conversations where as a person they know this, and yet we've set up a Byzantine set of motivators to get them to look past it, and that's one of those oddities that I see all the time, where it's like they're staring at a number as if the information that they need is in the number and not in the people that the number represents.
Yeah, I mean, a different way I think about it, but very much related, is you've heard the expression to get into the shoes of your customers, right? The reality is that when we're working in a business, we are facing outward towards our customers. Think about if you're standing in a mirror. Right? You're facing the mirror, but the reflection back is facing the other way. It's facing towards you, and that's our customers. So our customers have this perspective all the time, and we have this perspective. It's an opposite perspective. Mm-hmm. And so getting in the shoes of your customers, in my opinion, literally means becoming a customer of your own business.
Yeah.
Go do all of the things that you make your customers do. One of the things that absolutely I can't stand, and I beg CEOs and other executives to stop doing, is when companies have a special customer service number only for the VIPs, only for the executives. No, I want the executive to wait on hold for 20 minutes and feel what it feels like, and hopefully gets that executive upset enough that they say, we can't do this to our customers because this stinks, right? But if they always get to dial a special number that where somebody picks up immediately, they don't have any idea what their customer's going through. I found out, I did some work in the dental industry, and I found out that most dentists have their office in the back of the building. And the reason for this is they like to come in and out the back door. Why? Because they might come in, let's say at 8:55 for a 9 o'clock appointment. Right. They don't want to walk through a waiting room of people all waiting for the appointment, just seeing the dentist walk in at the last minute.
Right.
Okay, that's fine and good. But if you always walk in the back door of your practice, then you never see the fingerprints on the front door, or the fact that there are credit card stickers from like 17 years ago from credit card companies that don't exist anymore.
Right.
or that the magazine rack hasn't been updated since pre-COVID, or that the Kleenex box is out on the counter. You'll never see these things because you've never actually walked in the door that your patients walk in. And so I use that as an example in any company, that the more that we can become a customer, then it becomes comfortable, right? We understand how to be customers because we're customers in our real lives. So we get it, right? Here's another one to always try. Whatever business you're in, if you have people create a username and password, hit that little button that says forgot password and go through that process and tell me if it's fun. Okay? Because we all know that's like the worst process ever. But why hasn't anybody fixed it? Because nobody's done it at their own company. And nobody said, man, this is terrible. We really shouldn't put our customers through this. We should make it easier to reset their password. So I do think it's a matter of perspective. And when you turn it around, it is unbelievable. Just like when you're looking in the mirror and you're sort of seeing that opposite reflection, you see it from a different perspective, and that gives you the ideas of what to do next.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, in modern businesses, certainly e-commerce businesses, there's so little human-to-human contact. Where, you know, I think about the old-timey store and the merchant and they're greeting people. They see when they come in, they see who comes in, do they have kids in tow? You know, they had all of those sentient inputs that were data. It was just data of a different kind, but it was data in such a way that it elicited human empathy and sympathies directly. It wasn't something that needed to be interpreted into existence. It was there. They were there. And, you know, when someone was disappointed, they frowned and, you know, and they were confused, or they came in and pointed at something that was broke. You know, in all of your work with companies, and you know, as you consult with them, like going from a non sort of or a less human aware to a more human aware, like I don't know exactly how to you know, push it, but sort of what are your observations that sort of hold companies back from that shift, and sort of what what creates the aha for them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the e-commerce world certainly has changed everything, because it used to be that we had a human relationship with almost every company or organization, government entity, whatever, that we dealt with. And now you can have a lifetime of engagement at a company like, say, Amazon, and you'll never meet a person that works for Amazon, right? And that's okay. You know, the expectations are there, but not everybody does it as well as they do. And I think it comes down to two things, one of which most companies do reasonably well, and one of which most companies forget to do. The one that most people do reasonably well is voice of the customer. They listen to customers. They send out surveys. Better yet, they have conversations with real customers and ask them questions. They listen to sort of the depth of the answers, not just the quantitative, oh, here's what our score is, but here's what customers are saying. They're saying it's really annoying to reset their password. Maybe we should take a look at that. That's all the voice of the customer. I say you don't stop there. You go from VOC to what I affectionately call AOC. And I'm not talking about the Congresswoman from New York. I am talking about actions of the customer. Actions of the customer are what they actually do on your website or your mobile app, which isn't always going to be the same thing as what they say or even what they say they do. Right? So this is about watching people and the actions that they take, seeing the journeys that they take, seeing where they get stuck, where they spend the most time, watching what they search for on your website. Because guess what? If they are searching for something, they can't find it. That's a pretty good signal that maybe this something, if many people are searching for it, should be brought forward and should be made more visible to people. There's so much we can learn from the mounds of data we have of just how our customers are engaging with us. And when you pair that with what they're saying, you have the VOC and the AOC. Now you have this complete picture of what's going on with the customer, and you know where to start in terms of both elevating the experience and removing the pain points.
Right. And you know, it's exactly what we found, you know, in our work at Storyhub, because it's what they say and what they do. And so what they say is the voice of the customer, what they do, because often there's an incongruity between, when people say things and what they say and how they phrase them and their actions. And so by connecting those two things together, you start to really understand, it can give you the voice of the silent people. And
For sure.
because so often the voice of the customer stuff is a real thin sample, and it's a critical sample, but it tends to be thin. So
Yeah, let me give you a really fun example about this. I haven't thought about this in a long time. So my mother, for many, many, many years, when she went to the grocery store, she brought her checkbook and she wrote a check for the groceries. And I always thought this was a little peculiar, and obviously it takes a little while. The people behind you are like, what's going on? And it wasn't until I got to Discover Card when I learned through voice of the customer why this was. And my mom told me that in her generation there was something about some frowning on credit and debt and
Right.
what have you. But it was one person in a focus group who said it in such a perfect way that it finally became clear to me. He said, "I don't want to have to pay interest on a banana." Wow. Like, doesn't that now totally tell the story? Oh,
Right,
now I get it, why people want to still write checks, not as much anymore, but
Right.
why people want to write checks at the grocery store
Right.
versus some other store.
Right.
It's because they don't want to pay interest on a banana. Now
Right.
that insight plus observing, hey, lots of people are writing checks. Now we have something here.
Right.
And we can probably put a product together or a feature or a benefit within our credit card product that maybe addresses that. Hey, 0% interest on all grocery charges, whatever it is,
Well,
we can react to it.
Right. No, that's it. It's those insights are so critical, and it's a particular human phrasing something in a particular way, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Well, so as you help companies on this journey, sort of how, and I guess I'm thinking about how they sort of make the breakthrough to prioritize experience, because like as you say, fighting the game on price is a losing battle, and experience is that intangible. How have you found folks? How does the process of winning them to that perspective work?
So I think the challenge is that customer experience is too often looked at as this multi-year, multi-million-dollar transformational project, which in itself is overwhelming. It's overwhelming to say, right? And in bigger companies, especially multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects, there's many of them. So now you're prioritizing this particular project against all these other projects.
Right.
And it doesn't always win out. So I first start by getting people to think about experience completely differently. Mm-hmm. I look at customer experience as a series of little things. It is an endless series, to be sure. You have to enjoy the journey because there is no destination. But when we look at it as a series of little things, it becomes more approachable to everyone in the organization. Because I'm also a believer that everyone's job, no matter what your title or job description, includes customer experience. You say that you're in the back-end accounting department and you never speak to a customer. Guess what? You just made a decision last week that affected customers because you changed your payment terms from net 30 to net 45, or you decided that you were no longer accepting Amex because the charges are too high. These are decisions that impact the customer. So you're in customer experience, whether you think you are or not. When we start to look at little things, now everybody feels like they can play a role. It's not about having to lead this gigantic project that's going to take years to see any benefit. It's about creating a culture where everyone is thinking in a customer-centric way. Everyone is thinking about the fact that they are themselves customers and they know what they like. Everyone is trying to answer business problems through the lens of the customer to make sure that we are solving both the business problem and keeping the customer happy. Think about when this doesn't work. I always love to think about the airline industry, and I always I don't mean to be gender specific here, but I always feel like it was a guy that was back in accounting that said, I got a great idea, boss. Let's start charging people to check their bags. And then the boss says, but wait, for 50 years, we've allowed them to check bags for free. And the guy says, exactly. And that's how we got a $35 fee, which the customer gets what benefit for this? No benefit, because we were already getting the same thing for free. I would argue, although that made billions of dollars for the airline industry, that this is not solving the problem with the customer in mind. This is solving the problem through a spreadsheet, as you're saying, oh, we got to hit this number in revenue. Well, let's see if we can squeeze a little bit more out of each of our customers. Does that leave customers liking the airline industry more or less? We know the answer to that, right? And the airline industry has continued to be one of the more hated industries. And it's because of decisions like that. Can you make a decision that makes money and keeps customers happy, or that gives customers new benefits? Absolutely. Are customers happy to pay for better experiences or for faster or more convenient service? Absolutely. So we can do both. And so the short answer, now that I've made it a really long answer, the short answer is that customer experience is a series of little things. It is every single interaction that we have with a customer, no matter who they're interacting with or where, on what channel, it all matters. And if we start to look at it that way, we can make incremental progress every single day. And then you look up, like we did at Discover Card, and after a year of doing this, you win the J.D. Power Award for customer satisfaction, finally unseating Amex, another amazing company. And it's because we didn't do a massive project. We just started doing little things every single day.
Right. Yeah, put in a very crass way, like your customer experience is directly tied to the number of people and the number of shits they give.
That's right.
And it's just like, but somehow there's this cultural moment where because inside of most organizations there's some customer advocate who I remember at one of my businesses, Gail Boschman, hi Gail, was she would die for our customer. Like she was the one who there was no answer that involved her violating the trust of our customer. And she was amazing. It was a B2B business and absolutely amazing. She was just wired that way. And, there was no set of incentives that was going to move her off her mark. And so you have those people, but then you need to tip it to being a more culturally present, consideration for everyone. And ultimately hiring, probably, shifting your hiring practices, to folks who are empathetic. So it's a, because all of those little pieces are motivated by people thinking about those little pieces, right?
Yeah, and relatedly, it's applying the same concepts to your employee experience. Especially in industries where we have younger workers, and I work with lots of industries where this is an issue. We'll tell these younger workers, hey, we want you to provide a great experience for the customer. And they'll say, okay, boss. But the problem is, if you really dig, they don't have any idea what a good experience looks like. They haven't had a good experience. They don't know what we're talking about. So we have to show employees, do something great for your employees, and then say, you see how you feel right now? You see that big smile on your face? This is what we're doing for customers. This is what we want to do for customers.
Right.
The reverse is also true, of course, is that if you have a lousy experience at work, if people are abusive, if people are mean, if people are yelling at one another, how could you possibly expect them to then be nice to customers, right? It's just, you're not going to get that out of them no matter how empathetic they are. And so I always look at employee experience and customer experience as being an infinity loop, in that the fact that they feed off each other. So the happier your employees are, the happier your customers are, because the employees are going to be nicer to them. And when you have happy customers, guess what? It makes the employee's job easier, so then they're even happier, and it feeds and it feeds. These are both things that we have to focus on, because the other last point about this is that customer experience, by and large, is delivered by your human employees. Now, you're going to say, okay, but technology too has a big part of it. You're right, but technology is programmed by those same employees, right? And so it comes down to humans serving humans. And if your employee humans don't know what a good experience looks like, there's no way they're going to provide it for customers. One of the stats that I share when I do keynote speeches that absolutely blows my mind, and it's in the book too, is that 2/3 of consumers say they cannot remember the last time any brand exceeded their expectations.
Wow.
Which means, besides from that just being mind-blowing, it means that on average, 2/3 of your employees cannot remember the last time a brand exceeded their expectations. If you're sitting there saying to them, we need you to exceed our customer expectations, they may just genuinely not know how, because they haven't experienced it themselves.
Right. And so that's a super point, because that what is the wow experience? What is that? Because, and God knows, COVID has aggravated this problem massively, because we had the least sort of social, I'm thinking about the book Bowling Alone, about the decrease in sociality generation to generation for the last 100 years. So we have the sort of the least social generation. We have the COVID aggravator. We have the e-commerce phenomena, which again takes more human experiences out. So the importance of the employee experience as the staging area for just teaching people what a great experience is like. That's a huge. What are you in your journey? You must have seen some great examples of companies delivering that employee experience to help create that culture.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. One of my favorites, and I've actually written about this too. My first job out of college was with a small company called the Danbury Mint. We made high-end collectibles, plates, dolls, figurines.
In Connecticut.
In Connecticut, yes. I worked and lived in Connecticut. And one of the things that they did, and I thought this was so funny, I can't believe more companies don't do this. Once a quarter, they had something called Smile Day. Now, you knew it was Smile Day because when you showed up in the parking lot, there was a gigantic hot air balloon shaped like, they didn't have emojis back then, but that's what it was. It was a smiley face emoji balloon. And so you knew it was Smile Day. When you walked into the building, they had replaced all of the artwork on the walls with these framed photographs of 70s era goofy looking people with gigantic grins on their face. You literally couldn't not smile looking at these because they were so silly.
Yeah.
You walk over to the cafeteria and they're handing out free smiley face cookies to everybody. Who doesn't love a smiley face cookie? You get to your desk and there is a branded gift, some swag of some sort that's on your desk. And what people started doing is they'll put their swag up on a shelf, and it started to become this source of pride for people because you could tell how long someone worked there based on how many pieces of swag they had collected. And I'm telling you, the best part about it is everyone was just happier that day.
Right.
This is not a day that cost a lot of money or was like a huge deal. It's really corny. And yet, when everybody's smiling and they're having a better day, you've already made a ton of progress. Right. And then that translates into how we treat our customers, right? Because we're just in a better mood. I always try to think about people that work in contact centers. And I've spent a lot of time in contact centers. And if you think about this job, most of the day you're talking to unhappy people because nobody calls a call center to say, hey guys, just want to tell you you're doing a great job, right? They're calling with a complaint or a problem. Can you imagine every single day showing up to work and only talking to unhappy people? At some point, it's going to rub off on you.
Right.
So what we got to do is do some things to make our employees happy so that rubs back off on the customer.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I think about, working in the ER or cops or, just folks who are by definition lined up against challenging situations so that their worldview it's hard to not get skewed because your sample, to your point about service centers, is exclusively negative or so largely negative as to, not matter. No, and that's huge. One of the things that we did at one of my companies was we served banks, and we did this Adopt a Bank program where every employee had a customer of ours that they would adopt and get to know them, and they had to do we had a weekly meeting, and folks would do like a diorama, or they do a little shtick on it. But it was like, how do you, like, we're helping people, we're in the business of helping people, and how do we help them? Like, what's on the other side of, like, they choose us for their reasons, and then and our goods and services integrate into their lives somehow. Well, how? And that's so critical, because one of the things, and looping back to the beginning when you mentioned the marketing thing and the pop-ups, I think that and certainly we have so many channels and so much automation, God knows, with AI, and they've become these customer abuse mechanisms, and it's like, like that's who have our robots eaten today, so what's fascinating, another point from your book that you made about just want a company who understands me at least a little bit, and therefore engages with me in a relationship that I want to have with the brand. Because it's not about you abusing me to optimize. Hey, my pop-ups are 6%. It's like, yeah, but you're just abusing me. And in a world of infinite choice, how much abuse? So I think all the time about the relationship that I want to have with a brand, that you want to have with a brand, that whoever other person wants to have with a brand, and then, like, in those relationships might be a bit different, but we're human beings. There's probably not infinite variety, but there's a couple that would make it feel a heck of a lot better. So
for sure. And I want to add to this. I know you work with a lot of B2B companies, and I often hear from B2B saying, oh, isn't this just a B2C thing? Like, I'm not sure we got to do this. And I always say, well, it depends. Are your customers humans? And I just sit there and wait for the answer. And the reality is that even in B2B, you're not selling to a building, you're not selling to an office, you're selling to a buyer who is a human and who is a consumer in their real lives. And I love thinking about this from the perspective of the moment that a buyer signs a contract with a new B2B company, whatever it is that they do.
Yeah.
Now, in almost every B2B, what happens is there's a celebration of some sort. Sometimes they ring a bell, sometimes there's a Slack channel, sometimes they all go out to drinks afterwards. Meanwhile, the buyer is going home to his or her significant other one of two ways. They're either going home and saying, man, I just signed a huge deal today. Oh, I really hope I made the right decision, because if I didn't, my boss is going to fire me. Like, this was huge. We had to choose between 3 different companies. I picked the one that I think is the best, but man, if I'm wrong, I'm dead. Or they go home and they say, we just signed a new deal today that's going to get me promoted, because I just made the best decision of my career. And I know that because as soon as I signed the contract, they came and put their arm around me and they said, Dan, we're going to help you get promoted because you just made the best decision of your career. And that person goes home and they are pumped and they are excited and they are happy. And that's the relationship that they have with your brand, your B2B company, which, you think only markets to buildings.
Right.
But there is that person on the other end, and never mistake the fact that that person is looking to make a good decision for their company and for them, and that plays a huge role in there. And if you're ignoring that, then it's not going to work out, right? Because it's not, if you're not servicing that piece, then they're going to find somebody who does. And so again, I don't see this to scare people. I don't think customer experience has to be difficult. I don't think it has to be expensive, and I think it absolutely can be fun. This is why I do it every day, because I think it's really fun. Because when you make these decisions, when you do things differently, when you choose not to be boring and you choose to be different from the competition instead of just doing exactly what everybody else does, it can be fun. It brings out the creativity of your employees.
Yeah.
And it works. It gets people to notice you. And as we said before, to spend more, stay longer, and tell others.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that the example that you just used with B2B, because one of my other guests was Lincoln Murphy, who is at Gainsight, and he was very early in the customer success world in B2B. And basically that was where we all learned that, before in software as a service, before software as a service, software companies just sold a license to some company, and the consultants did all the heavy lifting and all, they puttied over whatever we forgot. And it was a very different world, because once you had, this, hey, our customers are on a subscription, and if they're not getting the value, they're leaving. So your point about that example of are they going home scared, or are they going home excited about all the promises that are going to be fulfilled by their new partner? And it brought to mind your story about Target and your media center.
Yeah.
It's which I love the story. If you could do a quick
I'll give you the short version. So I am there are people who love going to that Swedish furniture store and buying things in boxes and going home and building stuff for their afternoon. I am not one of those people. I love that brand. They're a terrific company. It is just, when I open up a box like that, it is, if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out already, right? It's just not my kind of thing. So I buy this media center from Target, and I told my son, my teenage son, I asked him if he'd help me. He said yes. I said, all right, I don't know how long this is going to take, but let's just set aside 2 hours, and I'm sure we can do it in that time. And I'm already kind of breaking out into a sweat, because I'm not looking forward to this, except that he's really good at it. So I got my super weapon there. Well, we pull out the box and all the stuff in it, and the very top of the instruction booklet, it's like they were talking to me. I'm surprised it didn't start with Dan, but it said, don't sweat this. It's going to be way easier than you think. And I was like, how'd they know? How'd they know I was sweating? And what was really cool is they delivered on that promise. There were parts, for example, there's a part where the latch is attached to the door. Now, in some cases, that's like 14 screws that you have to put in exactly the right place. And then if you screw it up, the door doesn't line up or whatever. Or they had already attached the latch. So that was really easy. I just got to snap it in and we're done. The whole project took 20 minutes. Yeah. And I was so happy, and I love Target because of it. And if I need another piece of furniture, I'm headed right back to Target, because they get me and I feel awesome about it. Again, it's no offense against that other brand, but it's just a different way. I mean, that other brand actually, ironically, has sort of made a name for itself with instructions that literally have no words. That's the whole idea. They have no words. So you also have to be a good pictogram reader to figure it out. I'm not good at that.
And love Allen wrenches.
Right. So it's little things. Again, we get back to the little things like that. If you know that half of your customers are going to be sweating this whole concept, just the idea of making them smile a little bit with the first line of the instructions takes a lot of the pressure off. Right. And it put me in a totally different mindset. I'm like, wait, maybe this is going to be fun. Maybe this is going to be fast. Okay. You got me. I'm in. Let's go do this. And just my attitude was better.
I mean, the difference in receptivity, right? When you feel threatened and afraid versus, you're kind of chuckling and open, it's just, you're in a different place to engage.
Yeah.
And that, so much of the, your focus on witty and that, it's like, because, when you're, and certainly, and this is in my B2B life, so much of the journey that we take people on is a journey that they've never been on before. And so when people are like, and you go step 1, step 2, step 3, make it really simple. And all the experts are like, no, but it's more complicated. It's like, no, we have to decomplicate it, because we have to give them a journey that they can look at the journey and say, I can do that.
If we're being honest with ourselves, most of the complexity that we put on customers is our own doing. It's our own processes, it's our own rules and regulations, it's our own nomenclature. Sometimes, we have companies that use jargon or acronyms or things that like the customer's like, wait, hold on, stop. What's an ISPID? Like, I don't even know what that is. So you're telling me to do something with it, but I don't even know.
Right.
So the complexity is of our own making.
Right.
And so that's always a great place. Again, if you work for one of these companies and you've never built the media center, you should go home and do it, right? And you should not just ask people, how was it to build a media center? No, go build the media center and see how you feel. And if you feel great, then you have a pretty good product with good instructions. And if you don't, then I can guarantee you there will be many customers like you that will feel the same way. And so you have an opportunity to fix it. And also, by the way, what I love about that story, what is the cost of changing the words in the instruction booklet? 0, right?
Yeah.
No cost. It's just a little bit of time for somebody to be maybe a little bit friendlier, maybe add a little bit of humor, and at least take the opportunity or take the time to try to get to know their customer base. Right. And it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, I mean, and knowing your customer base and your point about expertise and jargon brought an experience that I had to mind in personal life, doing some work with a nonprofit, and it was all around medical issues around mental health, and so you have this legion of professional clinicians whose overwhelming concern is precision in their language, in their descriptions, serving a group of people who, and it was for kids. So that the consumers of this site are going to be parents whose children are having challenges. And I'm like, well, like, precision isn't the right first thing to think about when you're thinking about parents who are like, I have a problem with the most precious thing in the world, and how do I do that? And there's all this jargon, and I'm like, this thing reads at like a PhD level, and you have to understand who you're trying to communicate with. And I understand there's going to be precision left on the floor, but if we achieve more communication at the cost of precision that wouldn't have communicated, then isn't it worth the trade?
Of course. Andy, you're going to love this story because I tell it on stage during keynotes, but it's not in the book. So you have not heard this one yet. It actually came from my podcast, which we're no longer producing, but still 185 episodes. If you ever want to go back, they're great. It's called Experience This. And we had a listener call us about an experience that they had at a children's hospital. Okay. And this guy gave us an audio file because it was a podcast. And I play the audio file during my keynotes because it is so emotional. And I get the chills every time I hear it. And I can't do it justice here, but basically what happens is this guy is in the hospital all day with his kid. And he talks about his kid crying and in pain and all this. And he's got to fill out paperwork, and he's got to listen to what the doctors are saying. And he's got to pay attention to everything, plus his crying kid. And oh, by the way, he just throws in that he's expected to be the strength of his family and to be the strongest one. And it's the end of the day, and he goes into the bathroom, and he describes this moment as the first moment, I'm quoting him now because I've heard this audio so many times, the first moment where I could be, oh my gosh, now I forgot what he said exactly. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can get this part out. Now I got it. He describes this moment as, this is the first moment that I can be vulnerable within myself. I'm like, wow, is that powerful wording? And I'm imagining him, he's in the bathroom, he's just closing out, he just needs a minute, right? And he looks up in the mirror, and there's a sign on the mirror, and it says, hang in there, Dad. And he just loses it because he's like, oh my God, that is exactly what I needed to hear at this moment. How the heck does the mirror know? And the mirror knew. Right. Yeah. And again, I don't know. I've never seen this sign. I don't believe it was in neon lights. I look at this as probably being a very simple, inexpensive thing to do.
Right.
But man, the humanity, the understanding of what this guy's been through all day long. Right. And he describes it beautifully in this audio as that somebody took a moment to put a metaphorical hand on my shoulder and just say, it's going to be okay. And it's exactly what he needed at exactly that moment. And what I always tell the audience is, I don't care if you're in the automotive business, if you're in banking, if you're insurance, whatever. You have customers who have a kid in the hospital right now. You have customers who are going through a divorce or a death in the family. You also, by the way, have customers who just got married or had kids or grandkids, or kids are going off to college. When we're part of our customers' lives and we know enough about them to be there for them in the good times and the bad, that's when the relationship gets solidified and loyalty is there forever. And we learned this, we should have learned this during COVID, because during COVID, the chips were down for everybody. And if you couldn't be empathetic during COVID when you knew exactly what everyone was going through, because you were going through exactly the same thing, then forget it. I don't think empathy is in the cards for you. But this is what we learned, and what consumers did during COVID, even if they didn't necessarily know this is what they were doing, is they aligned themselves with the brands that had their back, that were there for them, that understood what they were going through and did their best to help, versus the companies that literally just fell down on the job and just didn't react or adapt in any meaningful way. And so I love that story. I'm so glad that you reminded me of it, because you brought up, as it turns out, a medical facility for children. But this is how we have to think. We have to be able to get into the shoes of the customers in a genuine way, and understand that, just the idea of talking about taking your kid to a hospital, before you start with any clinical stuff, let's start with the emotion. That is a bad day, right? And so already people are walking in the door, they're having a bad day before anything happens. And if we can just react to that in just a small way, we can turn around the whole day.
Yeah, no, and it's such a fantastic example, because it's using small cues as a contextualization. Like, it's the men's room in a children's hospital, and the children's visitors are largely constrained to parents, and this is the men's room, so we're gonna taking all the complexities.
And maybe there's one in the women's room too. I don't know. I'm assuming
sure.
It doesn't say hang in their dad, but it probably
sure.
says something different. And you know what? I can just hear the arguments. Well, what if somebody's in there and they're not a dad? What if it's a brother? It doesn't matter. Okay, so for that person, they look at the sign and they probably still feel something, because they say, "Oh, that's really nice,"
Right.
So it doesn't matter. You don't have to hit it perfectly for everybody. But you're right. Where else are you going to do it but the men's room? It makes perfect sense. But it's just a beautiful sentiment, and it makes you feel like, man, God forbid if I ever have to bring my kid to another hospital, I'm coming here. This is where I'm coming, because they get me and they treat me well and they respect me, and they're and they feel like a partner. It's like the difference between a transaction and a relationship. A transaction is, we look at people as account numbers, or in the B2B world, I can't stand it when companies refer to their clients as logos. A logo? That's like beneath the client, right? Like a logo, that's all it is? Come on. Like, we can't call them logos. That doesn't work for me. Okay.
What about retention? It's like retention. It's like, what about love?
Yeah, exactly. An old boss of mine once said, loyalty goes both ways. And I love that concept. You want your customers to be loyal to you, be loyal back, right? Show them that you appreciate them being a customer of yours. And it isn't that hard. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do this. It's not about sending fancy gifts. It's often just about taking that moment to get to know your customer, to be there for them when it counts, good times and bad, and to show them that you appreciate them every once in a while. And people, it's amazing how far that goes. Think about it in the simplest terms, like on social media, right? You tweet at a brand and say, oh man, I love XYZ brand. And they tweet back at you and say, man, we love you too. You feel like you're like a celebrity. What? This huge brand just said they love me out in public? And then what does that do? You like the brand more or less after that? I mean, it's like it locks in lifetime loyalty. And all it took was a response to a tweet.
Right.
Not a real difficult thing.
Right. You were heard. Well, Dan, this has been an amazing conversation. I have 16 other threads and that you've inspired on me. But I will I am so thankful for the time that you give, and hopefully you can be on again. I was lucky enough, honored to be on your podcast when it was running. So. I always enjoy our conversation. So
my pleasure, and we definitely come back for a part 2 or part 3 some other day. But hopefully, if anything, hopefully people have seen or listened and heard that 2 pretty passionate people about this. That this stuff matters. It's important, and it is. One last thing I'm just going to leave you with is I don't think customer experience is a soft skill. I think it often gets looked at, as a soft skill. Sometimes marketing gets looked at as a soft skill. It's not. It's actually very strategic. And the impact that it has are very hard numbers. It increases your sales. It increases your customer retention rate. You keep more customers. You bring on new customers. These are all things that your executives care about. And so you'll notice I haven't talked a whole lot about NPS scores or customer satisfaction scores. Those are all great, but your executives are going to say, show me the money. And right. This is in customer experience, the line from customer experience to the money is straight. It is a straight, solid line, nothing soft about it.
Yeah, no, and that's something that we, in the focus with e-commerce, the customer lifetime value, like your average customer lifetime value, and like, okay, yeah, good. You can line everyone up and do some math. The people who have purchased from you once and then choose to buy again with full knowledge in a competitive world after experiencing your product, your brand, and your experience, their LTV, their customer lifetime value, CLV, whatever we count, is 3, 7, 10 times higher. I mean, this is, because, and in a world with rising acquisition costs, that's the money. Like it's
that's before money. They tell 5 other people about you.
Yeah.
If you're really counting customer lifetime value correctly, you're incorporating that too, because they're helping you. They're your sales team too.
Right. And oh, by the way, you're creating a culture internally, to your point, of missionaries, not mercenaries. And, and being a missionary is something that you can spend a long time doing. Being a mercenary creates fatigue.
So again, great point, right? If we keep our employees longer, then we save money on training and on hiring and all that sort of thing. And they stay longer. And what do? They tell their friends this is a great place to work. And so now they're helping us with hiring, right? It works. The same concepts apply. There you go. For employees.
Absolutely. Well, here we go. We'll stop before we go on to another tangent. So,
all right. Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate the experience maker. Oh yeah. If you don't have the book, go get it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.